much for taking the time to talk to me. I do really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
My first question is, like, I just wondered, are you an anthropologist first or a journalist first? Or are you a journalist first with an interest in anthropology?
I mean, I make my living as a journalist. I studied anthropology in college, and it's been a lifelong interest. So anthropology informs and affects how I see pretty much everything. And so I would say that the two actually go together very well. That it isn't either or. I think they combine in a really natural way.
Do you think that part of your anthropological interest is what helps you deconstruct then? Is that how you use it?
Yes, I do. Like, I tend not to see things in political terms. For example, out at Restrepo, they had this ritual, blood in, blood out. And a lot of reporters, where they, at one point they beat the second lieutenant to bring him into the outpost. And a lot of political reporters would have simply seen that as an example of poor morale or poor discipline or insubordination. For me, I saw that as a male initiation rite of the sort practiced by every tribal society throughout history, and so I feel like I just have a different, maybe a sort of more universal perspective on things.
Okay, I think that's good. Do you know, when I was invited to read War. Like, I haven't chosen any part of my Restrepo journey. It's always been brought to me, and I've always had my opinion asked of it rather than finding it. I didn't discover Restrepo myself. It discovered me, I would say. And I don't know if you know this. I'm a military wife. I'm a writer myself, but I'm also married to the military. My husband's an RAF Chinook pilot. And most of the time, I also ghost wrote a battlefield memoir as well. So I was invited by the BBC Two Culture show to review War, although it didn't actually get screened. But I got a preview copy of War before it was released in the UK. And I read some of it. To be honest, I personally couldn't finish it. Not because you didn't write, because you write fantastically and you are an accomplished writer, but just because when I read it, I just thought men need war. That's what came out of it for me, is that, like you said, a part of this sort of rites of passage, male initiation, sort of tribal culture. And I think it was the first time I'd ever looked at combat in that way, and it just really pissed me off, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was studying anthropology, the sort of truism that people sort of tossed around was, men need war because they don't have childbirth. And women have this one thing that men can never, ever, ever have. And you could make a case that there's a real sort of gender envy of that. And so men have created this one thing that women really cannot have. And it's it's sort of an interesting idea to play around with.
I don't know. I'd never considered it in those terms. Actually, I've got a 7-year-old son. And I looked at it more from, it was interesting, one of the things from the film that I took away was that guy who said that his mum made him make paper and she was a real pacifist and he wasn't allowed to express his sort of animal instincts. And I think it's more deeply rooted than that. I think that men need to fight. Like my son, he needs to fight. That there's a part of him that wants to just roll around and scrap on the floor with his father that I'm not interested, it just doesn't interest me. And he's obsessed with the 300 at the moment. Like, he really, which obviously he's 7. So my whole job now is to put this barrier between the 300 and this 7-year-old who's on this quest to watch this film. So I do think that there's a part of the male psyche that war is a part of, which is maybe it's not to, I mean, maybe the trauma journey is to do with childbirth, but the actual physicality of contact and combat and fighting is to do with men, which is why I couldn't get to the end of the book, really. But not because, it's just because I live in war. I've lived war for, my husband's been to Afghanistan 4 times. I've been with this conflict from the outset, from the minute the planes hit. This journey towards Afghanistan has been in our lives. So just to watch and read a book about it again after being so exposed to it on a day-to-day level, just for me was just too much, really, I think. Because I tried again last night. I thought, right, I'm going to speak to Sebastian Junger. I'm going in again. And I just thought, oh, no, I can't read it. It just does my head in. Anyway, I just wondered, did you ever play war as a kid then?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I grew up in the 60s. The Vietnam War was politically very complicated, and even children knew that. So when we played war, we were killing Germans, basically.
Killing Germans?
Yeah.
Interesting, being half German.
It was World War II that we were playing.
And were you American? You weren't a German?
Well, the unpopular boys had to be the Germans.
Was that? But you are actually half German, aren't you?
I'm the 16th Austrian.
Oh, okay. Oh, your wikio needs changing. Okay, have you ever been in a fist fight?
I mean, as a little boy. I mean, not since then.
Yeah, that's what I mean as a child. When was your last fight, like physical fight?
God, I don't know, 8? I mean, I don't know. I was pretty young. I'm a pretty peaceful guy.
Yeah, I have heard that. I just wondered. So did your mum and dad, they let you play war games then?
I mean, you can't, it's not a matter of let. Like, if your boy's outside and picks up a crooked stick, he's playing a war game. I don't think there's much you can do about it.
Yeah, it's true. My son can make guns out of fingers and, I haven't tried to stop him. And actually, most recently, having seen Restrepo and seeing that bit where the boy was like, my mum made me make paper, was quite profound in terms of, from a parenting perspective, to think about. Obviously, I'm a pacifist in terms of I don't fight myself, but to raise a boy and to help him grow into a real man, then it was interesting to think about that. Like, I did manage to avoid to keep the word gun out of his vocabulary till 3, and then it came into his vocabulary naturally, and then I was willing to accept it. But then that was it. Then his relationship with combat and battles has just grown exponentially. So you're a lover, not sorry.
And just to point out, there's a real difference between war and fighting. War is a very mechanical process, and it works best when you're not overloaded with strong emotions like rage and anger and fear. Like it works best when you're operating pretty complicated machinery in modern war, which is very different from a playground fist fight. And so there are guys who have never been in a fist fight in their lives who are incredibly good soldiers. And there are guys who are real, pub, barroom brawlers who would make terrible soldiers. So like there's a real, I think there's some genetic and cultural connection, but really they're very, very different things. Like don't lump them together too easily because they're very different states of mind, very different skills.
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely being simplistic in terms of, well, certainly with terms of a 7-year-old. I mean, obviously there's a certain degree of competition and strategy, and I do think it's almost like chess sometimes in some level. I think that there is a need for men to compete, and war is about victory. And are you still there?
Yeah.
So war is about victory, and soldiering and being in the military is about victory. So I do think there's this sort of competitive need as well between men, which war on some level fulfills as well. And obviously, well, I also have this massive phallic metaphor about guns as well, which is all about that guns are just about coming, and that it's just all about how big your knob is, and it's just the bigger the gun, and it's all about power. And I mean, I have lots of, I don't just simplify it into simple terms of, fighting. So I think you, from what I can see, I think there's something about you that is attracted to the extremity of living, though.
I mean, I think that's true about everybody, but to varying degrees. I mean, I'm easily frightened, and I'm pretty cautious. And when I take risks, it's a very rational process. Like I really try to figure out like what level of risk am I running, and what's the reward? What am I getting back from it? What's the value? What's the value of this? But